With the help of Hashem, we are learning the final daf of Shekalim, Shekalim daf Chav Beis. We're going to begin on daf Chav Aleph Amid Beis, 6 lines before the bottom of the Amid, 3 lines above the bottom Mishnah. The Gemara here is going to speak about the possibility and the rare occasions where Chazal, as we actually find in Torah itself, sometimes use a guzma, use a exaggeration. We're going to be quoting various statements that we have similar to the one we have today in Bavli. The Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis is going to speak about the following. Whenever we have kachei kachim meat that has to be either burnt or consumed in the Azara location, if it becomes disqualified and therefore it has to be burnt, so there was a location in the Azara east of the ramp, east of the Mizbeach, east of the outer Mizbeach, where they had what we call the Beis Hadeshin, the place of the ashes, which was a place dedicated, designated for the burning of Psuli HaMikdashim. Now, not only did they burn Kachei Kachim there, but truth be told, even parts of Kachei Kalim, but the parts that needed to be burnt on the Mizbeach, like the Chalavim and the Yevarim of Kachei Kalim, if they became pasul, they are to be burnt in the area of Kodesh, in the Hazara. Contrasting that with Karbanos in the category of Kachei Kalim, the parts that are to be consumed in Yerushalayim, if they become disqualified, they are not burnt in the Azara, they are burnt somewhere in Yerushalayim. So there was a Beis Hadeshin in the Azara, and then there were actually various locations outside the Azara where kachim of lower kedusha needed to be destroyed if they became disqualified. Question that we will be discussing over here is what happens if you have meats of kachei kachim, karbanis of kachei kachim, not that they became pasul, and there are many types of psulim, but they became tamei. Now that's different, because the rule is that if something becomes tamei in the place of the azara, it has to be removed. It also has to be burnt. But you could have burnt it outside the place of the azara. But on the other hand, it's kachei kachim. Kachei kachim, psulim, tamei is also psul. So we're going to have 4 opinions in the Mishnah exactly what do we do with psar kachei kachim that become tamei, and that's going to then lead us into the final Mishnah in the Masechta, which is going to be speaking about basar of kachim that is not pasul, that's kosher. And as we'll learn more details in Masechtas Talmud, that after the shechita, it wasn't that they shechted an animal and right away they took those parts of the animal that have to be burnt on the altar all the way up on the altar on the pyre. What really happened is that there were various steps in the offering of a carbon. One step was bringing it up to the ramp. They would place it down on the ramp, and that is when they would go into the Lishkas HaGazis, and that is where they said the Shema, and they davened big parts of davening. So we're going to be discussing exactly on what part of the ramp did they put down the evarim of which karbanos, etc. And finally, we're going to be discussing what about Shekalim Bizman pre-third Beis HaMikdash. After the Churban Bayesheni, what the Gemara calls Bizman Hazeh. Hopefully when this goes online, Bizman Hazeh will be with the third Beis HaMikdash. Now we know that we should not designate anything as kachim, because if you say something is kodesh, then it becomes part of the Beis HaMikdash. And if someone misuses it, you're chayiv me'ilah. Why would you do that? Many people have this good feeling, let me be magdish it, you're not allowed to do that. But if you did it, if a person took their half shekel and says, this is my half shekel, is it effective or is it not effective? Like for example, bikurim. There is no bikurim when there's no Beis HaMikdash. That's a pasuk clearly in Parshas Chisavei, when the person declares that I'm placing this in front of the house of God. So by bikurim, for sure, a person, even if he or she designated their first fruits as bikurim, that declaration is not effective. Question will be, what will be with shekalim? And actually we have 2 opinions in what the Rab Shimon holds, and we're going to be learning a lot more. Chavra, let us start on Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, 6 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The Mishnah was speaking about the awesomeness of the Paroiches. The Mishnah was speaking about the 2 Paroiches that separated the Kodesh from the Kachei Kachim. And the Mishnah writes that Ubishmoinim Vishtayim Riboy Hoisenases V'chulei, that it was made, the value of each curtain was 820,000 golden dinars. And then the Mishnah writes that if it became tamei, and actually, as we explained in yesterday's share, that midrabanan, every keli that was made to be used in the Beis Hamikdash, brand new, we know it was not tamei. Rabbinically, it needed to be toiveled. So the Mishnah says that it took 300 kohanim to toivel the paroiches. Says the Gemara that Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna says in the name of Shmuel. Now, whether this statement is only going on, you need 300 kohanim to toivel it, or the way that Rambam says that it goes on both statements, the 300 kohanim, and that it had the value of 820,000 golden dinars, guzma, this is a exaggeration. Now we have in Chulin Daf Tzaddik Amid Beis and in other places. There the Gemara quotes Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Here it's Bar Bizna, there it's Bar Nachmeni, just to point out a difference. And there the Chazal say that B'shloisha Mekoymos Dibru Chachamim Loshen Havoi. Loshen Havoi also means a exaggeration. And the three places that we have in Chulin Daf Tzaddik is Tapuach, Geffen, and Paroiches. This is the Paroiches. But let's read over here, and then I'll speak about the Tapuach. The Tapuach we also mention here. The Geffen is not mentioned here. And says the Gemara that Tamon Taninan, similarly, we learned in Masechtas Tamid that Pa'amim, there were times that Hoya Alel Kishleish Meyaskur. So in the center of the Mizbeach, right, when we were burning, there were various marachos. There were 3 marachos, there were 4 marachos. And as you burn karbanos, you begin to a lot of ashes begin to accumulate. And even though there was a mitzvah every day for trumas hadeshen to remove 1 shovel full of the ashes, but that was only 1 shovel full. There was a lot more ashes than that. Now, every now and then they needed to remove it, but it was considered noy mizbeach to leave ashes on the altar. It's being used, and they called that pile of ashes tapuach, the apple. So the Mishnah says in Talmud that there was a time that the tapuach was equivalent to 300 kud. 1 kud is 300 is 30 sa. This is a tremendous pile of ashes. And on that we also find that Rabbi Yossi B. Rabbi Bun in the name of Shmuel, that's a guzma, it's an exaggeration. So we have paroiches, an exaggeration. We have that the tapuach was that size, an exaggeration. Again, we quoted Chulin Daf Tzaddik. The third item there is the geffen. There was a golden vine that was placed by the entrance of the Beis Hamikdash, and when people wanted to donate gold to the Beis Hamikdash, they would buy golden leaves or golden grapes, and they would hang it on it. And every now and then there would be so much of it, they would have to remove it. That was used for designated purposes, and then there would be room for more golden vines and more golden grapes. So it says there also that there was a time that there was, I think there were also 300 golden grapes, which is a tremendous amount of gold. And on these 3, Chazal say guzma. Now, of two nekudas. First of all, al pinigla, that let's go without the Rambam. The Rambam is the only one that says that the guzma here also goes on the value of the 820 golden dinarim. But the pshat everyone accepts is that we're speaking about needing 300 kohanim. You didn't need 300 kohanim. But even though it's an exaggeration, it's not stam and the Weltarein in Yiddish. So the Gra makes a cheshbon that if you measure the parameter of the paroiches, it's exactly 600 tfachim. The 40 amas by the 20 amas. Every person has 2 hands. In other words, you could have had 300 kohanim holding on to it. Whether you needed that amount of kohanim, that's a guzma, because maybe less people can be strong. Maybe you can get away with having only 100 kohanim. But there's a rhyme and a rhythm. It's not just an exaggeration. And then to understand that these numbers have significance. Then to also understand that Al Pi Hasidus, since the Torah has many layers to it, there's Pshat, Remesh, Drush, and Soid, and the Rebbe spoke a lot about this. And Al Pi Nigla, 300 is a guzma. But the reason why the Torah, even Chazal, give such a number is because Al Pi Pnimiyas, there's something about the number 300 connected to the Tara of the paroiches. Or according to the Rambam, there's something about the number 820 on the deeper understanding of the Torah. Al Pi Pshat, it doesn't fit, so Al Pi Pshat, we can say the concept of a guzma. But there has to be always a reason why we dafka picked a certain exaggeration, and the deeper you get in the understanding of the Torah, the more precise the Torah will be, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, going on to the second to last Mishnah here in Shekalim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam v'shar kol nivei dvarim. Says the Mishnah, Psar kachem kachem shenitma. And as we explained, Psulei hamikdashim kachem kachem needs to be burned on the Beis Hadeshen, which was in the Azara. Psulei kachem kalim needs to be burned outside, in the place where it is going to be eaten, where it would have been eaten. On the other hand, Tumah needs to be removed from the place of the Azara. So here we have contrasting values. If B'sar kachem kachem shenitma, says the Mishnah, bein ba'avatuma, bein b'valadatuma, and already giving a heads up that we're going to have a machlokes amoyroyim. What does av and what does vlad mean over here in the entire Shas? We know avatuma means that it became tamei because it had contact with an av, which means it is a rishon, and vlad atuma means that it had contact with a rishon. It became a sheni, and we know that midoiraisa even chulin can become a sheni. But there is one Amayda that says that the meaning of Av and Vlad here doesn't mean what it normally means. Here, Av means Doiraisa, and Vlad means Midrabanan. And we'll see how that will play into the understanding of the four opinions in the Mishnah. So says the Mishnah, whether Ba'av, it had contact with an Av, let's learn the normal. Av means it's an Av, so it had contact with an Av, it became a Rishon. Whether this B'sar had contact, halachic contact with a Vlad, with a Rishon, which means it became a Sheni. Bein B'fnim, Bein B'chutz, question is, where did it become Tamei? Now, truth be told, Kachem Kachem belongs inside the Azara. You should not have removed it, but if they removed it and it became Tamei outside, still, maybe you have to bring it back in to burn it inside, because there is a rule that kachem kachem that become invalidated, and tuma is one of the many invalidations, needs to be burned on the Beis Hadeshen near the Mizbeach. So opinion number one, says the Mishnah, Bishama Yoimrim, as a rule, hakoil yisaref bifnim, because it's psar kachem kachem. There is, however, one exception. The one exception is, we're going to call this a scenario where you have tarta legreusa. There are two negatives. Number one, if shenitma ba'av hatuma, so therefore the severity of the tumah is very high, and you have to add that and here, bachutz, it became tamei outside the azara. Sai, it's very tamei. Sai, it's already outside. Here, Beis Shammai will hold, since it has again this tarta legreusa, don't bring it in to burn it. It's already out. Burn it outside the azara. Beis Hillel loimrim, opinion number two, punk fakert. You would think Beis Hillel is the kal. He holds tuma, get tuma out of the makom azara. Hakoel yisaref bachutz. However, there is a scenario we're going to call this tarta lemal yusa, where Beis Hillel will say it should be burnt inside. And that's the opposite of Beis Shammai. Chutz, that if it only became Tamei b'vlada tumah, which means it has a lesser severe tumah, let's go with that. And where did it become Tamei? While it is still b'fnim, that means it wasn't taken out yet. So since it's already inside here anyways, and the level of tumah is less severe, so therefore Beis Hillel will hold that you follow the general klal, that psar kachem kachem that became puzzle needs to be burned in the Beis Hadeshen in the Azara. Shita number 3, Daf Chav Beis, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, like this: Shenitma ba'av hatuma, if it became tama ba'av hatuma, bein b'fnim, bein b'chutz. As we only focus on the severity of the tuma, it's so tamei, take it out right away, burn it b'chutz. Shenitma b'vlada tuma, if the level of tuma is less severe, right? Whether it's outside already, whether it's inside, then yisaref b'fnim. That means you would bring it back inside to burn it. All we care about is severity of tuma. And opinion number 4, Rabbi Akiva Omer, we only consider its location. We don't care about the severity. Makaim tumasai sham sreifasei. Where is it right now? If right now it's bifnim, even if it's tamei ba'av hatuma, I don't care. It's in here anyways. You're not bringing tuma in. It's already in. And you're going to burn it. Burn it where you have to burn it. If it's outside, even if it became tamei with a less severe source of tuma, it's outside already. Don't bring it in. It's tamei. Don't bring tumah to the azara. So here we have the 4 opinions. Now, like we mentioned, what does av and vlad mean? Normally, av means avatuma. So, for example, there would be a dead sheretz, just practically. It could happen in the Makom HaMikdash, and the dead sheretz had contact with the meat. That would be meat that became tamei be'av. And the same thing, there was a dead sheretz that had contact, let's say, with a person. So the person biblically becomes a rishon, and then the person touches the b'sar kachim. So that means it became a tamei through a vlad. It became a sheni. That would be the normal pshat. However, Bar Kapara rejects that, because if that would be the pshat, the Mishnah will be very difficult to understand. Because don't forget, my friends, that even Vlad Hatuma is Tamim Midoiraisa. So why would we differentiate between more severe and less severe? At the end of the day, biblically it's Tamei. We got to get Tuma away from the Azara. It's much easier to understand the Mishnah by teaching Av and Vlad in an unusual interpretation. And indeed, Bar Kapara Amar, Av Hatuma here is not about Av and Rishon Sheni. It means Devar Torah. Whether it's on the level of an Av, whether it's a Rishon, whether it's a Sheni. Guys, let's not forget, we had this in Pesachim, right by Rabbi Chanina Sigan HaKayanim, that whole sugya towards the end of the first Perek, that Kachim can become Tamei Middo Oirais on the level of a Revi. Doesn't matter which level. Av here means Tamei biblically, and when the Mishnah uses the words Vlad Hatuma here, it means Midivreim. And it's going to be a lot easier to understand the various shittas in the Mishnah, as the Gemara will explain. However, Rabbi Yechanan says no. Rabbi Yechanan says, come on, Chevra, throughout the whole Shas, Av means Av, Vlad means Rishon. By the way, Vlad doesn't have to be Rishon. Vlad means a derivative. Vlad means not an Av. We had this also on Pesachim. Sometimes the Mishnah can call a Sheni a Vlad, because it means a Vlad of a Vlad. But that's not the point. The point is it doesn't mean Doiraisa and the Rabbanon. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, Bein Zeh Bein Zeh Dvar Torah. Av is Doiraisa, and Vlad is Doiraisa. However, the problem is, and this will really explain why Bar Kapara argued with Rabbi Yechanan. Says the Gemara that you should know that the Kasha did Rabbi Yechanan al the Beis Shammai. I'm going to miss this lashon. We had this whole, in other words, it's not that Rabbi Yechanan is going to have a problem on Beis Shammai. It's really the opposite. That Rabbi Yechanan's interpretation of Av and Vlad will become abgefrekt, will become, so to say, refuted based on that which Beis Shammai says. What does Beis Shammai say? Quotes the Gemara, reviews the Gemara, that Hakol Yisarav Bifnim, Chutz. Right, where does Beis Shammai agree it should be burnt outside, like we mentioned, when there's Tartel Ligreyosa? What would that be? Chutz Mishenitma Ba'avatuma. Number one, it became Tamei through an Av, and it ersh became Tamei Bachutz. So since it's anyways Bachutz, leave it outside. Burn it outside. Asks the Gemara on Beis Shammai, if Rabbi Yechanan's interpretation is correct, Ma Bein Av Hatuma Bachutz, Ma Bein Vlad Batuma Bachutz. What? Zev Zeh Loi Devar Toirahu. Who cares? I mean, the logic will be, since it's anyways outside, leave it outside. And a chanami. But why would there be a difference if Av and Vlad both mean what they normally mean, which would mean Vlad is also Doiraisa? So that's number one. Then the Gemara adds, what you think only the understanding of Beis Shammai becomes, so to say, impossible, or becomes very challenging if you teach the Mishnah like Rabbi Yechanan. The problem is not only from Beis Shammai. The Gemara continues, Vafilo al de Beis Hillel, lo mekashe. Why don't you ask from Beis Hillel? Indeed, ask from Beis Hillel. What does Beis Hillel say? The Beis Hillel Amar Hakol Yisrael b'chutz fakert. You always burn it outside. Chutz ma shenitma bevlad atuma. You need to have the tarta lamal yusa. Number one, it only became tamei through a vlad, and it's already b'fnim. But here again asks the Gemara, if Rabbi Yechanan's interpretation is correct, ma bein vlad hatuma b'fnim, ma bein av hatuma b'fnim, right? Logic should be the same. Zev zeh lo yidvar toiruhu. And you know what the Gemara says? Indeed, Loi havu ba rabbanon ela al de bar kapara. You should know, the Gemara says, is that when the Chachamim were discussing the Mishnah, they never analyzed the Mishnah according to the way Rabbi Yechanan suggested Av and Vlad. The Chachamim didn't analyze it that way because they had no way of explaining it. Now, the Chachamim spent time analyzing the Mishnah only according to bar kapara, and we're going to quote. Now, on kapara, there's also a kasha, but there they had a teretz. On Rabbi Yechanan, they didn't analyze it because they knew they won't be able to explain it. So let's see now what they did analyze the Mishnah according to Bar Kapara, and they also said, but here there was a kasha, but at least here they had an answer. The kasha, the Bar Kapara again, al de Beis Shammai, but you can ask a similar question. The Beis Shammai, oimrim, hakol yisarav bifnim, you got to keep to the rules. Psar kachim kachim, shenifsal, burnt bifnim. Tuma is another disqualification. However, chutz mishenitna ba'ava tuma. If it became tummy through an av, guys, let's go with Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara says av means if it became tummy midda oyraisa and it became tummy bachutz, or it's already bachutz, then leave it outside. And even here, the Chachamim who were learning the Mishnah, even according to Bar Kapara, asked, Ma bein av hatuma, bein bachutz, bein befnim, zeh v'zeh loy divrei toirohu. Av, according to Bar Kapara, means it became tamei midoiraisa. So what does Beis Shammai say? That only if it's already outside, leave it outside. But if it became tamei inside, even Beis Shammai says burn it inside. Why? If it's tamei on a level of doiraisa, tuma has to be removed. But here they answered. They said, "Here's a chayin." You find the same thing with Rabbi Akiva. What did Rabbi Akiva say? Rabbi Akiva only took into account location. No, you see that there is such a thing that even though it's tummy on a biblical level, you want to look at the location. Of course, if it's already outside, don't bring it in. But if it's in, burn it. The gin that Rabbi Akiva Amar, all we care is about location. That makim to masisham tehei fasai. So this will at least explain. So Beis Shammai came before, but this logic is a logic that Beis Shammai adopts to, that we do differentiate its location. Number two, v'afilu al de Beis Hillel loy mekashia. Here also the Chachamim challenged Bar Kapara based on Beis Hillel, but again they had an answer. But what was the challenge to Beis Shammai? Amar hakoil, just to be medayik, that Beis Shammai it's oimrim, Beis Hillel is Amar. These questions are not that big because you see the whole time there's so many different girsois and there was a corruption of text. L'chayda it's oimrim. Anyways, Beis Shammai Amar hakoil yisarav achutz, punkfaken. Always burn it outside. The only time you get to burn it inside when you have the tartel mal yusa. Chutz mishenitma bevlad hatuma. According to Bar Kapara, it means if it's I know. I just pointed out, Shloime, that l'chayda, just like by Beis Shammai, it's oimrim because it's lashon hara and bases the yeshiva. It's just not consistent. All I'm pointing out is could be it's a corrupted text. I don't know. We're not allowed to do it on our own. I'm reading Beis Hillel Amar. I'm just pointing out the issue. Anyways. That so Beis Hillel holds that everything has to be burnt outside. However, if it's only tamei bevlada tuma, which means it's only tamei bin derabanan midoraisa, it's bechlal not tamei, and it's anyways already inside, then you burn it inside. And even here they add the Chachamim, the Amoraim in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, they asked why ma bein vlada tuma bein befnim bein bachutz. If we are differentiating, which it makes sense. If it's anyways only tamei midrabanan, well, if it's anyways only tamei midrabanan, even if it became tamei outside, biblically it's not tamei. There is a rule that psar kachim kachim has to be burnt inside. Bring it back inside. It's only midrabanan. But there they had an answer. Again, it's not a logical answer. They were looking for a precedent. They're saying, here's a chayin, we find a similar din, and now we're leaving our Mishnah for a moment. We're going me'inyan le'inyan. We know that a mitzvah is the one that is set out from all of the three machnas. Not only do we have to, so to say, quarantine the mitzvah out of all the three machnas, but the items of the mitzvah, including his food and his drink, also have to be sent out of all the three machnas. Now, Rab Shimon explicitly says that this is referring even to machaloi umashkoi that are only tamei midrabanan. They also may never be brought inside Yerushalayim. In other words, we do find, you can't say it's only midrabanan. Okay, I get it that if, right, that's what Beis Hillel is saying, that if it became tamei midrabanan and it's anyways bifnim, burn it bifnim. But if it's already outside, don't bring it back in. Like the Gemara says, begin the Rab Shimon. We find such a similar concept by Shitas Rab Shimon. Again, beneged the din of the food and the drink of a mitzvah, that machalai umashkei shel mitzvah also are mishtachlin chutz l'sholos machnes, even if they only became tamei midrabanan. So therefore, it's a lot easier to understand the Mishnah if you follow the interpretation of Av and Vlad as does Bar Kapara, and with Rabbi Yechanan, the way the Gemara asks the question, it says don't even bother, because when the Chevra and the Yeshiva were learning this, they didn't understand how to explain Shitas Rabbi Yechanan in the Shitas that we have in the Mishnah. Okay, my friends, moving on to the final Mishnah in Shekalim. It's such a positive hemshech, because now we were speaking about something that's tamei. And at least we're going to end off, right, we're going to be Messiah, B'davar Toiv. No, let's speak about kachim that's not tamei. So we were speaking about where do you burn that which became tamei, where do you burn that which became pasul? No, it's not pasul and it's not tamei. How do you do avodah when everything is good? And like we mentioned from Talmud, that they didn't shecht it and burn it on the altar. There were various steps to the avodah. We also learned in Pesachim that it would take them normally 1 full hour to offer a carbon Talmud. And the Kahanim was reason. There was a big part of davening that was said in middle of shechting, preparing the limbs, placing them on the ramp. That is where they took the big break of the bringing of the meat itself, and they would go and daven. So where would they place it on the ramp is the topic of this final Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Evrei HaTamid. The limbs of the carbon Tamid, Nitanim or Nisnin, Machatzi, Keves, Ulamatom. Where, again, the Gersois, we're going to go with B'mairev. So yeah, you can see a picture over here, but the Tiklin Chadatin reminds us from a Sechtes Tamid, guys, let's say this by heart, that the length of the ramp was 32 amas. The width of the ramp was 16 amas. So what we need to do is we need to both divide the ramp in its length, and we're going to divide the ramp in its width. So when they place the Evarim down to go daven, they would number one place it in the lower half of the ramp. Now let's divide the 16 amas width into half, 8 and 8. They would place those limbs on the 8 westernmost amas of the ramp. We're going to read the words b'mairev. Why is that? Because shchinta b'marava. So you want to place it closer to the ulam, closer to the heichel, closer to God's house. However, when you have a day that not only would you have the tamid, you would also have the carbon musaf, shel musafin, and they did not want to place it mamish on the same location. So here there's a very important machloikis in girsa. Mamish, it's not just a word. It's not about semantics or lashon yachad, lashon abim. Here you got to know what the Mishnah is saying. Shal musafim nitanim mechatzi keves ulamata. Here b'mizrach. Let's go with the word b'mizrach. Now they would place the pieces, the evarim of the musaf. Also, everyone says in the lower half of the ramp. Now, what does Mizrach refer to? That's the big machlokes rishonim. Does Mizrach refer to Musaf itself? Or Rashi over there says that Mizrach refers to the Tamid. They would place the Tamid on Mizrach to free up the maitiv side of the ramp for the Musaf. Because they consider Musaf compared to the Tamid, Taka Tamid is the more frequent, it's studied, and we'll see our discussion here again. And when you have to pick which one comes first, aside of the din that nothing can come before the carbon tamid, but tadir koidim b'chlal. On the other hand, there's an additional kedusha to the musaf, because musaf is connected to Shabbos or to Yom Tov, and because of that, the musaf was placed on maitiv, and the evari tamid were placed by mizrach. So understands Rashi in the Mishnah. Next din in the Mishnah, shal rashi chadashim. So you would think everything is placed in the lower part of the ramp. But there was a reason why they dafka placed the evarim of the special karbanos of Rosh Chodesh, nitanim al karkoiv hamizbeach mil mailon. Now in Talmud Bavli, and we just shared this a few days ago, the word karkoiv is another word that is connected to the soivev. The soivev was 6 amas above the ground. The soivev was where the kohanim, when they needed to walk around the mizbeach from the middle, but it's not in the middle, it's on the second half. However, we will see the final that will speak out, Machloikas Bavli Yerushalmi, how to teach the word Karkov. So we'll see how the Yerushalmi teaches it here in the Gemara. But just to know, the Bavli Karkov means they would place it on the ledge, on the Soiviv. Why would they place it above? So we'll also see that, just to speak it out, because since not everyone knew that today is Rosh Chodesh, they didn't have a fixed calendar, even though that the Kiddush HaChodesh happened in the Beis Din, but at least the people that were not aware that it's Rosh Chodesh, it was a lot easier to see something when it's higher up. So they placed a dafka high for people, today is Rosh Chodesh, and they know today is not the Yom Lamed, today is Yom Aleph of the new month. Says the Mishnah, Hashkalim, and Vahabikurim, Einam Nehagim Ela Bifnei Habayis. Right? Shkalim, Pashit, it's not a pasik, but since we keep on learning that shkalim that are donated are only good for that year, the next year you have to give new shkalim. So when there's no Beis Hamikdash, if you would designate a shekel right now, how will it be used this year? Bikurim is a pasuk and Parshas Savei. There the pasuk says that you should place it lifnei, right? Beis Hashem Alekecha. There's no Beis Hashem Alekecha, there's no Bikurim. Aval Meiser Dagan, and Dagan means whatever Dagan includes. L'kula alma Dagan, according to many Rishonim, it's Tirosh Veyitzar, according to others, all the fruits. O Meiser Behema. And by the way, Meiser Behema, guys, we have this in Mesechtes B'chaydes Daf Nun Gimel, that this is one of the examples that Yesh Koyach B'yat Chachamim La'akar Dover Min HaTorah B'Sheva Al Taisa, that today the Chachamim told us not to separate Meiser Behema, but that happened after the Mishnah was written. That's because people would separate Meiser Behema, and if there's no Beis Hamikdash, they would inadvertently use it. There would be moil. But in the Mishnah says that the concept, Bismana Mishnah, both Meiser. Now again, but Trumas or Meiser is, by the way, there's another detail. You have to have the majority of the people living in Israel. But when you have that, it has nothing to do with the Beis Hamikdash. So Meiser Dagan, Meiser Behema, B'chayres, that we know today. Today, when the first animal is born, it has Kedushas B'chayr. Till it gets blemished, there's nothing you can do with it. Now the Mishnah concludes, the last din in our Mishnah, the last din in the Masechta, Hamagdish Shekalim ubikurim. If you were Magdish it, you shouldn't have, but you did it. So the Tanakama says, it's Kodesh. It is Kodesh. Now you have to destroy it to make sure there's no takala, but it was effective. However, Rab Shimon Oimer, now listen to what Rab Shimon says, that Ha'oimer Bikurim Kodesh, if someone says in his Bikurim Kodesh, that is not effective, Ein Kodesh. What is Rab Shimon saying? He's arguing with the Tanakama L'chayda, right? The Tanakama says that they are both effective. Rab Shimon says that Bikurim is not effective. What does that imply? That Shkalim are effective. And indeed, our version of Shitas Rab Shimon is that Rab Shimon is differentiating between Bikurim and Shkalim. He's not arguing with the Tanakama in both. No, he only argues with Bikurim. However, we'll see in the Gemara that there is a Rab Shimon ben Yehuda that says in the name of Rab Shimon, not the way we have it in the Mishnah. And we'll repeat that when we learn the Gemara. However, the first wide line. So the Mishnah says that the Eivarim of the special Rosh Chodesh Korban is put on top of the Karkoiv. And then we said that in Talmud Bavli, the Karkoiv is the Soiviv. However, the Gemara here in Yerushalmi is Zeu Karkoiv HaMizbeach. According to the Yerushalmi, they put it even higher. What is the Karkoiv? Not the ledge that's 6 amas above the ground. No, it's Amma ben Keren lekeren. Karkoiv refers to the top of the Mizbeach. What part of the top of the Mizbeach? Both to the area between one horn and the other, which is the outermost periphery of the top of the altar, and Makim Hiluch Raglei HaKahanim. You have to add the word and, because we just learned this. The Kahanim did not walk in the area between one Kedem to the other Kedem, because then they would bump into the horn. Inside the Amma of the Keren was a walkaway for the Kahanim. It was placed bekitzad all the way high up. Musfei Shabbos or Musfei Rosh Chodesh. Asks the Gemara, which one should be brought first? Mi koidem. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Savar Meimar, that Musfei Shabbos and Musfei Rosh Chodesh koidmen. Which is unusual, right? Because normally we have the klal, right? Tadr v'she'enu tadr koidem. No. And how do I know? That's why he needs a raya. So he says that Chele, the Rabbi Yirmiyah, Chele means the koyach. No, that's another lashon in the Yerushalmi. What's his proof? What gives him that power? From the following law. And no one is going to debate the following law. Shiroi shel Shabbos v'shiroi shel Rosh Chodesh. The Levium would sing a unique melody for each type of carbon. And when the question is, which shir of the Levium comes first, clearly it says, Shiroi shel Rosh Chodesh koidem. So it only makes sense that if it comes to singing the song, the one of Rosh Chodesh comes before the Musaf of Shabbos, so the carbon itself should also come first. Amar Rabbi Yoisa, I reject your proof. Shanya hi taman, that's something different. Because the Amar Rabbi B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, indeed, why did they sing the shir of Rosh Chodesh first? For the same reason that we learned in the Mishnah that the Eivarim were placed much higher up. Kedei lefarsem ha'yilidiyah shur Rosh Chodesh. So that's the reason. But on the other hand, the other rule is more important as far as precedence. Keitzad haya oisa, not the way you say, Rabbi Yirmiyah, that Musfei Shabbos is first. No. You said that Rosh Chodesh is first. No. That Sheichtei Musfei Shabbos. Musaf of Shabbos has to be slaughtered first. Why, my friends? Because Tadar Koidim. But you know what they did? They shechted the Musaf of Shabbos, and the first niggin that they would sing is the one that is connected to Rosh Chodesh. How great is that? No, you're davening, you're beautiful. When you're not speaking about the niggin, but you're speaking about the shechit itself, Musfei Shabbos and Musfei Rosh Chodesh, Musfei Shabbos koidvan. Why? Al Shem, that kol hatada mechavere, whoever is more frequent than its fellow, will automatically be koidem as chaveroim. Weiter, going back to the Mishnah, Shekalim and Bikurim. So we had in the Mishnah the Tanach that says that if you were Magdish Shekalim and if you were Magdish Bikurim, nowadays meaning right before the third Beis HaMikdash, then it's kodesh. Rab Shimon says Bikurim is not kodesh, which implies that Rab Shimon is only arguing with Bikurim. But he's moide that what? That if you designated now, you took a half a shekel and you says, I am designating this for my yearly half a shekel, then yes, then kachai, indeed, so holds our Tana Bishitas Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. However, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, says no, has another girsa, has another version of what Rabbi Shimon holds. Bein elu, or bein elu, loy kachai. It's not even effective. And now we're going to bring in a third topic which is related, and that is like this. When someone becomes a ger, so a side of the Tefilla, side of the Milah, side of Kabbalah Samitzvahs, which is the Iker of the Gerus, Bizman Habayis, a convert would bring karbanos. Would bring a carbon. It can bring the most inexpensive karbanos was to bring a cane, a pair of birds. By the way, many would call that carbon Pesach. Not connected to when the get is converting or bringing the carbon, but just like we, the Jewish people, when we all converted, the first carbon that we brought was a carbon Pesach. Interesting, so it's like a carbon Pesach. The question is, what happens nowadays that there's no Mizbeach? So theoretically, when someone converts, they should designate money that they will use to buy at least the cane, the bird karbanis, when the Mizbeach is going to be built. So let's read it inside. Tani we learned in the Brais that Ger Bizman Hazeh, pre-temple, Tzarech Lahavi Kinoi Revius Kesef. He has to designate a quarter of a silver dinar, which is a relatively small amount of money, minimally, because that will be enough to buy the minimum level of carbon that a get has to bring, which is the cane, the pair of birds. And a chanami, azoyidas. However, Amar Rab Shimon, Bitla Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai already said, don't do that anymore. Why? Mipnei atakala, which makes so much sense. In other words, we don't want to have what we would call a stumbling block. If someone is going to have in their possession money that is hegdish, someone will inadvertently use it. So don't do that. Now, Ma'u mipnei atakala, where do we find such a concept? Many times, Mahu is almost like Minolan, not my Tama. We understand the Takala, but where else do you find such a thing? So the Gemara says, Kahadadatani. This is consistent with another Braisa. Bachlal, not about the Ger, about every Jew. Ein Magdishan. No, Bizman Abayis, you would declare this is Hegdish. Says the Tana, don't be Magdish. V'loi Ma'arichen, the unique Erech vow pledge, that a person says, my Erech on me or your Erech on me, connected to age and gender, the end of Bechul Koisai, or there's another expression of Hegdish called Chedim, not Chedim Lakoyhanam, but Chedim Lashem Veloy Machrimim. We're going to go with the Girsa of the Gra. We'll take out the next few words, Bizman Hazeh. First of all, don't do it. However, V'im Higdish Oy Herech Oy Hechrim, again, we're going to take out the words Oy Higbia. So says the Tana, Haksus Tisar, if it was a garment, burn it. Habehema te'aker, uproot it. What does it mean to uproot an animal? Right away we teach. Ketzad moed l'fanei adeles, lock the door in front of it. V'hi meisam elel. And the money should be thrown into the Yam HaMelach. So all of this is just going back that, by the way, here clearly we're saying that it is effective. Elama, you have to right away destroy it. Why do you have to destroy it? Because you might inadvertently be moyel behegdish. Avar vehigdish. What happens? Now, Avar vehigdish is not going back to the case of our Mishnah. We already know the three sheets of Tanakama. Rab Shimon of our Mishnah and Rab Shimon ben Yehuda b'shem Rab Shimon. Avar vehigdish goes on the ger. So now that we're saying that the Rabbi Yechanan and Zakkai said don't do it, same question. Until how strong was his takana? Did he say don't do it, common sense, or did he somehow take away your ability halachically to do it? So min ma da amar Rab Shimon bitl Rabbi Yechanan and Zakkai. Since we are saying that the only reason is because of takana, it makes sense that the last line in the Amid that hada amra aver vehigdish kachay. In other words, stumbling block is only a reason why don't do something that will create a stumbling block. But takala is not normally a strong enough of a reason to completely prevent it from becoming holy in the first place. Says the Gemara Rabbi Yehuda an tud raya. This is the second time recording this Rabbi Yehuda. Bo'ai, he asked in front of Rabbi Yosi. And what did he ask? Same question over here. Hachem, what's in the case by money designated for a ger, right, designated by the ger, at Omar Daf Chav Beis Amid Beis, that kachay, that's the way we understood. Okay, but Hachi over here, if someone designated a shekel for the base, for the half a shkalim, here you're saying that loy kachay. This, my friends, is a kasha on the shita of Rab Shimon ben Yehuda b'shem Rab Shimon. It's according to our Rab Shimon, it's good. At least it's consistent. Rab Shimon is saying that bikurim is not kodesh. Bikurim is not kodesh because the Torah says lifnei beis Hashem alikecha. But shkalim, don't do it takala. But if you did it, it's kodesh. And indeed, you see clearly over here the way we understood b'shem Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai that if the ger designates money, that it's effective. You have to be careful, destroy the money. So what would be the rationale of Rab Shimon ben Yehuda that would go a step more by shkalim, and Taka Rab Shimon ben Yehuda holds that Rab Shimon holds that if you designated shkalim, it bechlal was not effective. It's not chal. Why? It's really the same takala. So answers the Gemara Amarle like this: Taman over there, meaning here by shkalim, lokach ein magdishin lechatchilam lefisha mitzvah lahakriv mitruma chadosh. You have to understand that the downside of separating shkalim right now is much more severe than a ger designating money for his or her gerus karbanos, carbon or karbanis in the birds. And why is that? Because since, as we have been learning in this Masechta from the beginning, that every year we gave a new half a shekel. And the shkalim that I designated for this year can only be used for karbanos for this year. It cannot be used for karbanos for next year. So if I'm going to separate a shekel right now, I got myself a real problem. Now, of course, Mashiach should come today, and we'll use it today. But there's a very small window when this money will be usable, which is why there's a larger logic to say that Chazal took away your ability to be magdashit. Masha'en came when it comes to money designated for a carbon or for the bird karbanos of a convert, veheich havalei yeshana, right? I'm sorry, veheich havalei yeshana, and it will become old. It will become old after the new year, which is why it's more problematic. But v'hache, meaning here by the ger, my islach lamemer, what's the problem? I mean, he shouldn't have done it because he might be moil inadvertently, but if someone designated money, a convert, this will be my money for my carbon, what's going to happen? What are you going to tell me? It's going to become old? Ha yeshanahi? Does it become old? There's no such a thing. There's no such a thing as money designated for a carbon becoming, so to say, outdated, beyond the date. Legabe hekdeshois achedim, regarding all other karbanos, including vikinai shall get enutzara chadasha. Doesn't have to be from money that you just designated. That's why it makes more sense that ve'im higdish kadosh. We are explaining Rab Shimon ben Yehuda's version of Shitas Rab Shimon. It stims. A ger's designation should not have been done, but if he did it, it's effective. And Anachanami throw it liyam hamelach, but it's effective. Shekalim is even worse because it's going to become yoshan, it's going to become tiklan atikin. I still frek the Gemara vi and acheno achi yibana beis hamikdash, if you designated the shekel. So the answer is shema yibana habayis kabarishayna, that it's possible that the beis hamikdash will be built as it was in the first time. When was the first beis hamikdash built? Speaking about the Mishkan, on a Chodesh Nisan. We're hoping, right? That's one of the sources that ben Nisan asidu ligalois. The beis hamikdash is going to be built in the month of Nisan, and when Nisan will come, all of the shekalim that were designated prior to Nisan is too old. There'll have to be a new shekalim fundraiser. V'titraim trumas halishka min achadasha bizmana be'echad b'Nisan, and therefore, there's a very small window when a shekel could be used. So at least Rab Shimon ben Yehuda holds that the Chachamim took away our ability to designate a shekel as a shekel. It's not even effective. But by a ger, my islach, you can't. There's no such a thing is not a problem. The Beis Hamikdash should be built today. God forbid it's only going to be built tomorrow. It doesn't matter. When the money that you designated for the carbon, it will never be outdated. Now, what's the halacha? That's the question. Now, do we paskin like the Tanach? Do we paskin like Rab Shimon? Do we paskin according to which version of Rab Shimon? So the Masechta concludes that Rav Hamnuna and Rav Ada bar Ahava, in the name of Rav, they paskin halacha ki Rab Shimon, not like Rab Shimon ben Yehuda b'shem Rab Shimon. They paskin like Rab Shimon of our Mishnah. Bikurim is taka not effective. It's taka not effective. But the half a shekel designation will be effective. The only question is, when exactly do you have to throw it into the Yam HaMelech? And l'chu'ura, you would only have to throw it maybe in the Yam HaMelech, not immediately. Maybe you hold on to it until the next Rosh Chodesh Nisan, even though that's not what the Gemara says regarding the carbon of a ger. On this we conclude Masechta Shekalim. I just want to share the following, that the next Masechta that we learn is Masechtas Yuma. People pronounce it Yoima. We'll pronounce it the way our teachers in Cheder pronounced it, Masechtas Yuma. And the big question is that if we're going through the Seder of Yom Tovim, there has to be a rhyme and a rhythm. First should come Rosh Hashanah, and that's not the way it's going to go. It's going to be Yuma, Sukkah, Beitza, and then Rosh Hashanah. But Yuma is connected to Shabbos, as we'll speak more tomorrow in the intro, because it's Shabbos Shabbosin. And I want to just speak about Shekel and Yuma, that we're speaking about Kachim. And by the way, Masechtas Yuma, don't think that we're going to be learning about the 5 Inuyim. That will be learned at the 8th chapter at the end. Almost the entire Masechtas Yuma is all about the avodah that is done in the Beis HaMikdash. And when it comes to us connecting ourselves and the world to God, so as we know in Alad and Chasidus, there is us elevating ourselves, there is Halah, and then there is Hamshach, then there's bringing godliness down. Here, when we're speaking Shekalim is Gelt. Gelt is a pashut from the world, that we're taking a piece of this world and we're separating it and we're elevating it. It's like another Truma. Yeah, of course, it's making it holy, but it's making it holy by separating it. And the same thing is with Yom Kippur, that just like we are meant to elevate the world, we are meant to elevate time itself. And there's no greater elevation of time than the elevation of Yom Kippur, by making it, as what we would call it, the Shabbos Shabbosim, the holiest day of the year. So we're speaking about Hala'ah, and L'chayt al Pi Chasidus, Rosh Hashanah is the opposite direction. Rosh Hashanah we know is Binyan HaMalchus. Binyan HaMalchus is that we're bringing God to be the king of this world. Hamelach hayoyshev, the concept of sitting, that you're bringing godliness closer. So maybe since we are still in the mode of going up, we continue from Shekalim into Yuma, and then later we finally reach, as we'll go through, guys, in the next 11 months, aside of Shekalim, after Shekalim, we will, God willing, be making 8 more Siyumim. Mazel tov to all.